fix the lights. Now, where were we?
Will.
You were about to tell us who Christopher left his money to?
Ah, yes. As I was saying, there were 5 million reasons to want Christopher Adams dead. Outside of an allowance for Mrs. Bell, he left his entire estate to, and I quote, no, that's not it. Ah, here it is. He left his entire estate to Mrs. Ivory, Captain Amber, Miss Sky, Mr. Verdant, and Miss Cardinal.
I had no idea. Did any of you?
You know, this feels familiar. Here we are, back where it all began. It's been a long night. Probably feels like days have gone by. But I've been putting my little brain cells to work double time. And with this final piece, I can finally reveal to you all who done it. That would have been a great spot for some dramatic music.
I miss Mrs. Bell.
So all that built up and he's just going to tell us straight away?
Oh no, he'll draw it out. There will be a discussion of our motives, a recreation of events, a little twist, and then the big reveal of who done it. Oh, and all the clues will be explained.
Seems the two of you have sorted your differences, but I was just about to explain your motives.
You spotted that one.
Outside the lure of a massive inheritance, which I do not believe none of you had knowledge of, you all had specific reasons to want to see Christopher Adams reach an untimely end. Rejection, reputation, betrayal, humiliation, and sickness. You wanted justice, and to see how justice was served, let us recreate the events of the night.
You were right about this one, too.
Exciting, isn't it? I have always wanted to be part of one of these.
Through the study, we will start with Captain Amber, and he can tell us about Miss Sky coming through that secret
What did you know
passage.
about that?
Wait, detective. May I see that used bullet?
What do you want with it?
Call it a hunch.
Everyone's a detective.
It's a perfect fit.
Mrs. Bell said that it was in the hall.
But that means...
I know who killed Christopher and Mrs. Bell.
I do too.
And I'm sure our amateur detectives have figured it out as well. Haven't you?
I'm glad you all have thoughts, but I was just about to reveal the identity of the murderer.
Can we still please recreate the events? I was really looking forward to it.
Swell idea, don't you think, detective?
I mean, if you insist.
You do. To the hall.
You know, the drive is starting to harden, so this recreation cannot take all day.
Then we'll have to double our speed. We are the last ones to arrive. Miss Sky, that's me, Mr. Verdant, Miss Cardinal, Captain Amber, and Miss Ivory. We took a picture with Christopher by the couch. Cheese! Then the big variety show began, and Christopher gave us toast. Then we talked to him in different places around the house.
Yeah, and that's where I discovered you all had the opportunity to make the shot that killed Christopher Adams.
Except there were 2 shots. But I'll come back to that later.
So Detective Noir arrived here wet and covered in mud. He interrogated a lot of people, and Mrs. Bell spilled a drink on him, and took his coat, which I saw from the conservatory where we were all gathered. Then we got sent to separate rooms for the detective's interrogations. All right, I went to the kitchen with the detective. Come along, detective.
But first, the study. This is where our amateur detectives discovered Captain Amber and I locked in a passionate embrace.
Yeah, and how Miss Sky came over to the study from the powder room to
Which
the secret
I didn't
passage.
tell anybody about. Did you?
How curious.
Then the eyes behind the portrait moved. I screamed, ah! You ran and got the detective. When we came back, we discovered it was Mr. Verdant behind the portrait. A physical altercation.
I ran from the room and the detective gave chase.
And then I discovered that the line to the telephone was cut on a call from the chief inspector.
But first, the kitchen.
Well, this is ridiculous. Oh,
We talked about the detective's shiny car and desperation and poisonous white oleander, which I saw in the conservatory on the table.
yeah, and how you rejected an expensive gift of perfume from Christopher, just like he rejected your pleas for financial assistance.
Actually, you were the first to suggest that I rejected it. How curious.
Then I screamed in the study. Ah!
You've already been there. Got to keep moving. Next, the detective chased me to the billiard room. First, Mrs. Bell returned the detective's coat. Then, we talked about my lesson Stella passed.
Yeah, and how you received the gun from Christopher right before he was shot.
It's not what it sounds like. A gun you were able to locate in a pretty good hiding place with only a cursory glance around the room.
How curious.
Then, you went to check up on the window that pops open basically all by itself in the conservatory.
But nobody was here. Miss Cardinal did find you surveilling in the hall, however.
I'm getting whiplash.
But there was a crash in the kitchen. Such an immersive experience. I almost just believed that there was a crash in the kitchen.
But there was. Come on.
It was just a gelatin mold. Fell off by the cellar door.
This is where we found the body of poor Mrs. Bell, who had been poisoned with white oleander, presumably for knowing too much about who killed Christopher and discovering the murder weapon.
Her last words were, "It was in the hall," and she was clutching a bullet in a corner of...
White paper.
Yes, we know your feelings about it being an invitation, Miss Guy. But none of our invitations were missing the corner. We realized that when we went to check the house while the detective talked to Miss Cardinal in the powder room.
Yeah, Miss Cardinal and I talked about open windows and truth and how you were all pointing a finger at each other, which is what guilty people do, I might add.
Because we are guilty, detective. Guilty of hurting each other, but we're starting to make peace and move on. Do you know why? Because of Christopher Adams.
How could you possibly say that? That man was involved in all sorts of shady, likely criminal dealings. There's no telling what he's done to other people besides the thing he's done to all of you.
Haven't you been listening? When we met Christopher, we changed for the better. We might not have known how he was working in each moment, but we know that he helped us realize the truth about ourselves.
Then why are you so blind to the truth about him?
I think we're getting really close to the truth now. Suddenly, Captain Ember and I called everyone to the hall.
Can we finish this? I can't take much more.
Gladly. Here in the hall, we discovered the contents of Christopher's will. Just a few moments ago, we found this hole in the banister, which perfectly matches this spent bullet. And for the bullet to end up here in the hall, the shot had to come from...
Outside the window. There were windows in each of the rooms that we were in, meaning someone outside the window could see that I rejected the perfume.
And that I used the secret passage.
where I hid the gun.
And someone outside the window would know where the breaker box was.
And be wet and muddy.
And be concerned with things Mrs. Bell might have found in the garden or, say, in his coat pocket while cleaning it.
An invitation.
You were right. An address to the last guest to arrive. The one that Mrs. Bell could not find inside. Detective Guy E. Noir.
Mrs. Bell, you're alive!
He's getting away!
Wait, hand me that scarf. I learned a few things from the big house back in the day.
Yeah. Well, you're gonna need more than that to pin this on me.
Well, we do have this, which I doubt can be matched to you, but I did lift this from your coat pocket along with that invitation. I believe it will match the cut on the phone wire.
And your car would not have been as clean and shiny if you arrived after the murder when the drive was quicksand, as you said.
Which was the reason for 2 shots. The first one made Christopher turn towards the window, and the second made it look like it come from someone inside the house.
Then all you had to do was collect all of the evidence and find someone to pin it on, but Mrs. Bell got to it first.
You had the opportunity to poison her while we all waited in the study.
Thankfully, you were unfamiliar with white oleander and gave her the flowers instead of the leaves, which are the less toxic part. It's not what it sounds like! Anyway, I just can't understand what possible motive you could have to kill Christopher. All he wanted was for people to see the truth about themselves.
But it wasn't the truth he was selling. You know, there are people who are paid to do things like detection, but then some schmuck like Christopher Adams goes out and peddles the "you can change" stride. And suddenly everyone starts getting ideas. Important things get missed, people get hurt.
I never knew Christopher had hurt someone. He saw all sorts of things no one else did.
Like what?
Like us.
Like you. You had an invitation in, but you chose to stay outside. Why? To create a crime that only you could solve?
Yeah, that's right. All these amateur detectives out here, everyone thinking they can do my job better than me. This is who I am. He was trying to take that away from me.
Then I'm afraid you have greatly misunderstood Christopher Adams, detective. You have made your job your entire identity. It is a dead thing that cannot sustain you. Christopher was trying to give you something better instead.
Drink of living water.
And it would have breathed a breath of fresh air into your line of work and given you a better sense of purpose. But it's not too late. We are all changed and set free because of him. You can be too.
That kind of freedom is dangerous.
Yeah, but it may be the only kind you get for a while.
Well, what do you know, huh? It was the perfect crime. And I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you meddling kids.
Well, what now?
I think first, some sleep. Then I may look into becoming a detective. I think I have the right sort of skills for it. I'll use them for good, like Christopher would have wanted.
And I'm going to begin the job that Christopher left for me, managing his estate. Mrs. Bell said that I would still be needed to continue the work.
Christopher's work? Like big parties?
No, I've been to quite a few. I could try my hand at planning some if you'd like the help. And we certainly have tons to celebrate.
Like our friend who is dead but is alive again.
And our shared inheritance.
Our healed relationships.
I'm sure we won't always get it right. Change is a journey, but if we remember who Christopher showed us we could be and remind each other of it often, I believe we will honor his legacy.
Why not start now? The guests are still here. Mr. Verdant, would you do the honors?
Gather round, everyone. Yeah, you lot too. We have now solved the mystery that Christopher has given us. To find out what we now have in common, we have all been changed by knowing him.
So let us make these 20s roar with gratitude for our newfound family. We're not of blood, but of his spirit.
And let's celebrate the many priceless gifts he's given us all. To 1923.
To 1923!